My family quarreled because I told them I was going on vacation. Family dinners in our house were never quiet. They were performances, a mix of cold routines, reheated casseroles, and passive-aggressive tension served in equal measure. That Sunday started like every other: dry meatloaf, limp green beans, and faces pretending we were a loving unit. I wasn't planning a revolution. I had one sentence. One simple thing to say. But I'd rehearsed it 100 times, knowing it would land like a bomb. As I sliced into the leathery meat, I said it. I'm taking a trip next week. Silence. My sister, Renata, didn't even blink. Then, without changing tone or pace, she said, I always knew you'd walk away. She looked around the table like a witness needing validation. Our mother, Eloise, stared at her plate, not at me, and whispered more to herself than anyone, he can't be counted on. Always thinking of himself. I just cancelled the credit cards they use, by the way. She said it like a declaration of war. Then, as if that wasn't enough, she muttered, you just can't rely on me, though no one had asked her to be relied upon. That was her pattern, claim the role of the victim while clutching the control panel. Renata's face twisted into something between fury and heartbreak. You're abandoning us, she said, louder now. Mom raised her voice too. It cracked with a kind of theatrical pain. You're leaving your family behind to sip fruit drinks on a beach while we suffer? I looked at my father, Silas. He said nothing. Just kept chewing, staring ahead, refusing to acknowledge the drama unfolding 3 feet from his fork. That was his habit for years now, no arguments, no defenses, just silence. Once, he had opinions and presence. Now, he was a shadow with a fork. I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I just went upstairs and started packing a little more into my suitcase. I didn't owe anyone here an apology. That trip wasn't about the destination. It wasn't about the beach. It was about reclaiming something they had quietly declared wasn't mine, autonomy. The truth was, Renata had been flailing for years, failed ventures, forgotten debts, disasters I had cleaned up too many times to count. 3 businesses, 2 maxed credit cards, a lease I had co-signed and regretted every day. She once totaled a car and told me insurance was a scam when I asked why she hadn't filed a claim. And I paid. I always paid. Groceries? Me. Electricity? Me. Her cat's vet bills? Also me. I don't even have a pet. Mom hadn't worked in over a decade. She had episodes that never came with diagnoses but always showed up when rent or bills were due. The family model was simple: if I had no spouse, no kids, then my life was theirs to live by proxy. My time, my bank account, my emotional bandwidth, it all belonged to them. But I had started saying no. I cancelled the cards, one by one, each of them a little lifeline they'd come to expect would never end. I said it out loud, not loudly, but enough for it to register. You can't count on me anymore. Renata's eyes welled up, but it wasn't sadness, it was disbelief. Like I'd broken some invisible contract. Like I was supposed to suffer quietly. Mom stood so quickly her chair scraped tile. You don't just leave family. Dad kept chewing. I walked out. Packed the last of my things. Closed the door. The next morning, Renata realized she couldn't place her usual Amazon order. Mom's data plan was down. There was yelling, and then silence. I left early for work. When I got back, there was a kind of desperation in the air: anger, guilt, even tears. Renata told me I was triggering a breakdown. I made dinner for myself and said nothing. That night, Dad knocked on my door. He looked exhausted, older than he should have for a man in his early 60s. Take me with you, he said. I didn't ask why. I nodded. I added him to the flight, told him to pack light, and made sure we didn't sit near anyone who might talk too much. 2 days later, we were airborne, me, Dad, and 2 of my closest friends, Devin and August, on a plane headed west. Not to paradise. Not to escape. Just somewhere that wasn't here. When we landed, it was like someone had cut the strings from our backs. Dad looked stunned, standing at the gate with a single carry-on like he didn't quite believe it was real. Devin and August were waiting near the rental car, plastic lace around their necks and oversized sunglasses on their faces. They looked like a parody of tourists, but they looked free. Dad shook their hands like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than any of us. We checked in, dropped our bags, and walked straight to the beach. Devin popped open a beer, tossed one to Dad. We stood there, waves crashing, wind moving through us, saying nothing. And then Dad muttered it, not to anyone, really, just out into the air. This is what people mean when they say life is good. The first few days in Fernal felt like a different lifetime. We hiked a crater trail with red dust clinging to our shoes, rented dune buggies and tore down paths lined with palms, ate grilled fish on the beach until our stomachs hurt. My father, this man who once limped from the bedroom to the mailbox, ran after August like a kid, shouting and laughing. He didn't complain once. Not about his joints. Not about his life. At home, he could barely get through a walk around the block. Here, he was sprinting down beaches, climbing ridges. At one point, he tried a mango smoothie, grimaced like it betrayed him, and then ordered a second one. But the real surprise came on the third night. We were at the hotel bar when a woman bumped into him. She looked like she belonged in this place, sun-kissed skin, long, silver-threaded hair pulled into a bun, and eyes that didn't flinch when he looked directly at her. Her name was Mariana. She apologized for the spilled drink. He said something dry but charming. And just like that, they were talking. The next evening, he told me he had plans. I didn't ask. The night after that, he disappeared again. Devin joked, "We're about to get ditched by your dad for a beach romance." August raised his drink and said, "Let him. He's earned it." And he had. He showed up the following afternoon in a shirt that didn't belong to him, a bright floral button-down that looked like it came with its own theme music. His hair was slicked, his face looked 10 years younger, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, he smiled like he meant it. He didn't give us details. We didn't ask. Somehow, that made it even better. The day before we left, he came back to the room late. I was sitting on the balcony with a drink the color of sports equipment, staring at the sky. He sat beside me without a word. The silence stretched. Then, in a voice as calm as if he were reading a grocery list, he said, "If I had left your mother back in '97, I think I might have had a chance." He didn't cry. Didn't raise his voice. Just said it. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. We flew home in silence. No drama. No plans. As the taxi pulled up to the house, the weight in my chest returned. Like we were going back to something that wasn't a home, it was a job. Mom, Eloise, opened the door the way a manager checks a time card. No hug. No warmth. "Did you have a good time deserting your family?" she asked. Renata stood behind her, arms crossed, a quiet snarl on her face. Dad didn't respond. He just walked past them. I followed, went to my room, and started unpacking. I didn't expect peace. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Renata came in, no knock, just a storm of emotion and accusations. She cried. Loudly. Said I was killing her. Said I had betrayed everything. When I didn't respond, she escalated. She grabbed my desk lamp, threw it. Tore up an old photo of me and some college friends. Dumped detergent over my clothes. "Why should you have a good life," she screamed, "if you're not going to share it?" I laughed. Quietly. Walked past Mom, who didn't look up from her magazine. Found Dad in the kitchen, eating leftover chili like he hadn't heard any of it. "Did you hear that?" I asked. He nodded. "You think this is news?" he replied. The next morning, Eloise declared a family meeting. Dad didn't attend. He went golfing with a neighbor whose name he barely remembered. Renata was outraged. Said he was being disrespectful. I thought it was the smartest thing he'd done in years. Mom held court like she was presiding over a courtroom. Talked about loyalty, responsibility, the decay of family values. Never said my name. But every sentence was aimed at me. Renata interrupted often in louder, shriller versions of the same scolding. Then, Mom said it. "You've disgraced this household. Your father should be ashamed. Running off, leaving us behind, God knows what he was doing there." I stayed quiet. But then Dad walked in, still in golf shoes, sweat dripping down his temple. He looked around, blinking slowly, then said, "Oh. This is still going on?" Renata lost it. She hurled her coffee mug at the sink. It shattered. "You let him twist you. You let him poison you against us." Dad sat down calmly. Took a sip of water. Then looked at her like she was a stranger. "Maybe if you and your mother didn't try to control everything, people wouldn't need to escape all the time." That was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. Renata stormed out. Mom stood there, stunned. Then she got up and walked away. That night, she texted Dad. "I want a separation." She didn't say divorce. Just that word, separation. As if daring him to chase her. He didn't reply. He just deleted it and turned back to his game. The next morning, she started packing. But by late afternoon, she was still in her robe, making phone calls, repeating, "I might leave. I just might." She didn't. She never does. 2 days later, Renata returned. Said nothing. Just stormed into my room while I was at work and tore it apart. Smashed electronics. Ruined clothes. Shattered glass on my bed. When I came home, she was sitting on the edge of the mattress like it was her throne. I didn't yell. Didn't argue. I packed a duffel bag, grabbed my laptop, some clothes, a framed photo of me and Dad from the trip, and left. I found a short-term rental an hour outside the city. Nothing fancy. Just a room, a kitchenette, and silence. I left a note for Dad, told him where I'd be. He called that night. "Good," he said. "About time. Now, he visits sometimes. We sit at a diner. Drink coffee. Talk about nothing. Sometimes, when he gets quiet, I know what he's thinking. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But maybe this is the only way it can get better." I didn't return to the house for a long time. The space I found outside the city wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. A single bed. A window with honest sunlight. A tiny table where no one asked what I was doing or when I'd be back. For the first time in years, I woke up to silence that wasn't tense or weaponized. But the calm didn't mean things at the house had settled. They hadn't. It started with the messages. Renata began sending texts at odd hours. Long, erratic monologues that bounced between anger and sorrow, insults and apologies. One said, "You were supposed to be the anchor, Jonas. The base layer." Another, "I hope your little island escape was worth it." Dad, during one of our weekly breakfasts, told me she'd quit another job 2 weeks in. Said she was sleeping most of the day and arguing with Mom by sunset. He added, offhand, that Eloise had started locking her bedroom door at night. He said it the way someone might report the weather. Calm. Icy. Unshocked. Then, a knock at my apartment door. It was late. I hadn't told anyone where I lived except Dad. She stood there, Renata. Barefoot, eyes wild, holding a crumpled envelope in one hand, her phone in the other. "You did this," she said. I let her in. Not because I wanted to. Because I didn't want my neighbors witnessing whatever came next. She paced the kitchen before tossing the envelope on the counter. It was from a collection agency, one I'd never heard of. I skimmed it, overdue loan, compounding fees, thousands owed. I asked why she brought it to me. "Because you left," she snapped. "You were supposed to help me handle all this. Like you always did." I didn't reply. I just watched her spin out. She spoke in spirals about how Mom barely acknowledged her, how Dad was unreachable, how everything had fallen apart since I left. Then, without warning, she collapsed onto the floor, pulled her knees to her chest, and cried. Not performative crying. Not rage. Just defeat. She shook like a fault line breaking open. "I don't know how to exist without someone holding me up," she whispered. I didn't move for a moment. Then I made her tea. Sat in the chair across from her. Waited. When the sobs slowed, I told her the truth. I wasn't coming back. I wasn't going to save her. That part of my life was over. She nodded. Didn't argue. But I knew better. 2 days later, my car door wouldn't unlock. A prank. Then, my mailbox was stuffed with glitter and mayonnaise. Renata's brand of retaliation, ridiculous, frustrating, small-scale destruction that said I still have reach. That weekend, Dad came by. I told him everything. He didn't flinch. Just handed me a soda and said, "She won't stop until your mother tells her to." But Mom wasn't going to stop her. She never had. Eloise needed Renata's chaos. It made her look reasonable by comparison. If Renata quieted down, Mom would have to confront her own reflection. And she wasn't built for that. So I changed the locks. The text stopped. For a while. 3 weeks later, a message from Renata. She wanted to meet. Neutral territory, a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and her part-time job. I agreed. Not out of hope. Just to end the cycle. She arrived in a blazer 2 sizes too large and a brittle smile. Sat across from me like she was preparing a defense. She spoke in careful tones, laying out her case, overdue bills, a banking mistake that wasn't really her fault, fees that had piled up unfairly. Then she asked for help. Not just money this time. She wanted me to co-sign something. A loan, maybe. A lease. I didn't even register the details. When she finished, I leaned forward and said the last thing I ever intended to say to her. I'm not going to help you. Not now. Not ever again. She blinked. You can cry, scream, break things, smear peanut butter on my windows, I don't care. The well is dry. You used it all up. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she smiled. A small, strange smile. You're serious, she said. Dead serious. I told her this was the last conversation we would ever have about money. That if she ever needed a brother, I might still be around. But if she was looking for a wallet with my name on it, she could forget it. She didn't cry. Didn't shout. She just stood, pushed in her chair, and walked out without another word. I thought the next act would be retaliation, more vandalism, more twisted guilt trips. But nothing came. No packages. No texts. No tantrums. Silence. And slowly, through Dad's careful reports, I heard that something was shifting. Renata had taken a second job. Started driving deliveries on weekends. Tried selling handmade jewelry online. None of it was steady. But it was hers. For once, it didn't involve me. Eloise began drifting too. She stopped mentioning the word separation. Stopped organizing fake family meetings. Even her lectures grew weaker, like a general who couldn't find an army to rally. Meanwhile, I was beginning to feel like someone again. Not a tool. Not a crutch. A person. The stillness I'd found didn't just feel like distance, it felt like healing. No more midnight emergencies. No messages that made my heart race. No surprise bills, no emotional landmines waiting behind every door. Just silence. Then, something I hadn't expected happened at work. A promotion. I wasn't campaigning for it. I didn't even think I was in the running. But apparently, years of being steady, showing up, and carrying quiet burdens count for something. The bump in pay wasn't life-changing, but it was enough. I moved again. A new apartment. Bright. Simple. With a small balcony that overlooked a quiet side street and just enough sunlight to make mornings feel real. No one asked what I was doing with my life anymore. Dad visited sometimes. He'd sit on the balcony with me, sipping coffee, nodding at the trees like they were giving him advice. We didn't talk much during those visits. He liked the silence too. One afternoon, he brought an old photo. It was from Fern Isle. Me, him, Devon, and August, sunburned, probably a little buzzed, standing on the edge of the ocean, ridiculous plastic lace around our necks. You should hang this up, he said, and left it on my kitchen counter. I framed it. Renata didn't reach out for help again. Not once. Instead, she sent the occasional text. A childhood photo. A link to a song we used to sing in the car. A meme that didn't need a reply. Sometimes I'd send a thumbs up. Sometimes nothing. She understood. That part of our lives was over. Dad kept his own quiet rhythm. Still saw Mariana when he could. Still talked about leaving, selling everything, heading west, disappearing into some quiet town where no one knew his name. But he never left. Not really. I won't, he once told me, sitting on a park bench while we shared fast food. I just like to imagine it. That, I understood. Dreaming about freedom is sometimes the only freedom people like him get. And me? I stayed steady. Dad said once that he was proud of me. That I was the only one who had the nerve to really walk out. I told him it wasn't courage. It was survival. Eloise never mentioned the trip again. Never used the word separation after that message Dad erased. She drifted into her routines. Passive. Remote. The general of a silent war with no soldiers left. And the house stayed broken. But it was no longer my burden to hold up. Sometimes Dad would say he felt sorry for her. Other times, he didn't say anything at all. The last time we talked about it, he said, we built a cage together. It's too much work tearing it down. So we just decorate it differently now. I asked if he was happy. With you and Mariana? Yes, he said. With the rest? I survive it. And that was the closest thing to peace he'd ever admit to. A few months after I moved into my new place, he showed up with a pizza and 2 sodas. No invitation. Just knocked on the door like he was coming home from college. We sat on the couch, shared dinner, and watched a movie we never finished. Talked about useless things. High school teachers we hated. That time I tried to fix the garage door and ended up locking us in for 2 hours. It was the most normal night we'd had in years. Since then, it's become a quiet ritual. Sometimes he visits. Sometimes I meet him for lunch near his job. Sometimes we just sit in his truck and eat takeout, neither of us in a hurry to leave. He still doesn't talk about Eloise much. When he does, it's only to say she's in one of her moods again. Which could mean anything. Or nothing. Renata, I hear, is still trying things. Dad says she's putting effort into her online jewelry business. That she's trying to stay out of Mom's shadow. I hope she makes it. But it's no longer my place to carry her. There's a difference between supporting someone and enabling them. It took me most of my life to learn that. Now, I have a routine. Work. Walks. Quiet mornings with coffee and no questions. And every time I look at that photo from the trip us, squinting into the sun like people who finally remembered they were allowed to smile, I remember what it felt like to finally, truly leave. Not just the house. The role. The cage. The script they handed me. It's not a perfect life. But it's mine. And for the first time, that's enough. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.